Ethan Carter had built his life around a world of numbers, deals, and power moves, each one calculated, each step meticulously planned. But in a fleeting moment on a New York sidewalk, everything he thought he knew about himself came crashing down. There she was, the woman he once loved, standing with two boys who shared his face. The doctors had told him it was highly unlikely he'd ever father a child. For years, he had carried the heavy belief that his legacy would die with him, that no one would carry his name into the future. Yet, in the blink of an eye, his world was shaken by a truth he had never anticipated. The city lights of New York flickered against the tinted windows of the black limousine. Ethan Carter, billionaire CEO of Carter Enterprises, loosened his tie and sighed. It had been another long day of board meetings, business deals, and carefully calculated decisions. But nothing in his life had prepared him for what he was about to see. As a car rolled to a stop at a red light, his sharp blue eyes landed on the sidewalk. A woman stood there, holding the hands of two little boys. But not just any boys, boys with ginger-red hair and the same piercing blue eyes as his own. His heart pounded against his ribs. No, it couldn't be. The woman turned slightly, and his breath hitched. Emma Walker, his first love, the one woman he had never truly gotten over. They had been childhood sweethearts, inseparable since they were kids. Until he broke her heart. She was supposed to be in his past. Yet, there she was, looking as beautiful as ever. But it wasn't just Emma that held his attention. It was the two identical boys beside her, laughing and holding onto her hands. They looked exactly like him when he was a kid. Impossible. Ethan's mind raced as a light turned green, but his driver hadn't even noticed his distraction. "Stop the car," Ethan commanded. The driver hesitated. "So, now." The limousine pulled over, and before he could think twice, Ethan stepped out onto the busy street. His heart pounded as he took a step toward her. Emma turned her head, and their eyes met for the first time in 8 years. She stiffened. Her grip on the boy's hands tightened. For a moment, neither of them spoke. The city buzzed around them, but to Ethan, it felt like time had frozen. Then, he swallowed hard and took another step forward. "Emma." She hesitated before replying. "Ethan." Her voice was cautious, guarded. His gaze dropped to the boys. There was no denying it. The freckles, the sharp jawline, the blue eyes, the red hair. The realization hit him like a train. His voice was hoarse when he finally spoke. "Are they mine?" Emma's expression turned cold. "You don't have the right to ask me that." And just like that, she turned around, pulling the boys with her, disappearing into the crowded sidewalk. Ethan stood there, frozen, as a storm of emotion surged inside him. He needed answers. And this time, he wasn't going to walk away. Ethan barely made it through the rest of the night. He sat in his penthouse, replaying the encounter over and over in his head. Were they really his? No, it didn't make sense. He had a medical diagnosis, a condition that made it impossible for him to have children. His doctors had told him years ago that he was infertile. But the moment he looked at those boys, something inside him screamed that they were his. His phone buzzed, breaking his thoughts. It was Ryan, his best friend and top lawyer. "Ethan, what's up? You sound off." "I saw Emma today," Ethan said, his voice tight. Silence. Then a slow exhale. "That's Emma." "Yes." Ryan hesitated. "And she had 2 boys with her." Another pause. Then Ryan's voice dropped. "Yours." Ethan ran a hand through his hair. "She refused to tell me anything." "But Ryan, they look just like me." Ryan whistled. "Damn." "I need to know the truth," Ethan said firmly. "And I don't care what it takes." There was a pause before Ryan spoke again. "I'll make some calls." Ethan clenched his jaw. He had spent years making billion-dollar deals, outsmarting business rivals, and winning every battle he entered. But this was personal, and he was not going to lose. Ethan barely slept that night. His mind kept replaying the encounter, the look in Emma's eyes, the way she gripped the boys' hands like she was afraid he would take them away. But the worst part? Those boys. They were him. By morning, he was done questioning it. He needed proof. He sat in his office, fingers tapping against his desk. When Ryan walked in, a folder in his hands. "You're not gonna like this." Ethan stood. "Tell me." Ryan sighed. Emma Walker, 30 years old, works as an interior designer, lives in Brooklyn with her twin sons, 8 years old. Ethan's chest tightened. 8. That was exactly how many years it had been since they last saw each other. Ryan continued, "She's never been married. No records of a father on the birth certificates. No lawsuits, no paternity claims. Nothing." Ethan gritted his teeth. "That doesn't mean I'm not their father." "No," Ryan agreed, "but it means she's been hiding them from you." Ethan clenched his fists. "I want a DNA test." Ryan raised an eyebrow. "And how do you plan to get that? She won't even let you near them." Ethan exhaled sharply. "Then I'll have to find another way." Ethan didn't waste time. He sent his private investigator, James, to keep an eye on Emma and the boys. He needed answers. By the third day, James had something. "They go to Ridgewood Elementary," James reported, sliding a few photos across Ethan's desk. "Smart kids. Straight-A students. The teachers love them. No father ever listed on their school records." Ethan stared at the photos. 2 identical boys, playing soccer, smiling, laughing. His sons. His jaw tightened. "I need a DNA test." James hesitated. "There might be a way, but it's risky." "I don't care." That night, Ethan showed up at Ridgewood Elementary's charity event. Parents filled the auditorium, chatting over punch and cookies. And then, he saw them. Emma stood near the back, watching as the twins ran toward the snack table. Ethan's heart clenched. They were so full of life, so innocent, so his. Steeling himself, he walked up to Emma. She noticed him instantly, her body going rigid. "What are you doing here?" she hissed. Ethan's eyes didn't leave hers. "We need to talk." She scoffed. "There's nothing to talk about." His gaze flickered to the boys. They were eating cookies, completely unaware of the storm brewing. Ethan's voice dropped. "Emma, I know they're mine." Her eyes darkened. "You don't know anything." His patience snapped. "Then prove me wrong. Take a DNA test." Emma's jaw clenched. "You think you can just show up after 8 years and make demands?" "Yes," Ethan said simply. "Because if they are my sons, I have every right to know." Her hands trembled slightly, but she lifted her chin. "You lost that right a long time ago." Ethan's voice softened. "Emma, please." For a moment, something flickered in her eyes. Pain, regret, maybe even guilt. Then, just as quickly, she turned away. "They're my sons, Ethan, not yours." And with that, she walked away, leaving Ethan standing there, more determined than ever. Ethan stood frozen, watching Emma walk away with the twins. His heart pounded. He had built an empire, crushed competition, and turned failing businesses into billion-dollar successes. But this woman, this one woman, was shutting him out like he was a stranger. And maybe, after 8 years, that's exactly what he was. The past rushed back like a tidal wave. He and Emma had been inseparable as kids, growing up in the same small town. They shared first kisses, late-night talks, and dreams of forever. But when Ethan's father pushed him into the business world, everything changed. He had left her behind. Or worse, he had broken her heart. Ethan clenched his jaw. No, he couldn't let the past dictate the future. He needed proof. If Emma wouldn't willingly give him a DNA test, he would find another way. Ethan sat in his penthouse, his fingers tapping against his whiskey glass. Ryan sat across from him, watching him closely. "So let me get this straight," Ryan said, crossing his arms. "You want to get a DNA test behind Emma's back?" Ethan's jaw tightened. "It's the only way. She won't agree to it." Ryan sighed. "And how exactly do you plan to do that? Walk up to the kids and ask them for a strand of hair?" Ethan didn't smile. "Something like that." Ryan muttered a curse. "You're insane." "Maybe," Ethan admitted, "but I have to know the truth." Ryan exhaled and shook his head. "Fine, I'll set it up. But if Emma finds out, she's going to hate you even more." Ethan's stomach twisted. She already hated him. But if those boys were his, nothing would stop him from being in their lives. A week later, the DNA results were in. Ethan sat in his office, the envelope in his hands. His fingers trembled slightly as he tore it open. His heart pounded so loudly he could barely hear anything else. Then he saw the words that changed everything. 99.9% probability of paternity. The paper nearly slipped from his fingers. His breath came in short, uneven bursts. He wasn't crazy. He wasn't imagining things. They were his sons. He had 2 children. For a moment, he couldn't move. The weight of what he had lost, 8 years, crashed down on him. He had missed their first steps, their first words, their birthdays. He had missed everything. His hands curled into fists. Emma had kept them from him. And now, there was no way in hell he was walking away. He picked up his phone and called Ryan. "She lied to me," Ethan said, his voice deadly calm. Ryan sighed. "I know." "I'm going after my sons," Ethan said, his grip tightening. Ryan hesitated. "Are you sure about this? This could get messy." "I don't care," Ethan growled. "I'm taking her to court. I want my sons." There was silence on the other end. Then Ryan sighed. "Then buckle up, man, because Emma Walker, she's not going down without a fight." Emma could feel it in her bones. Something was coming. Ethan wasn't going to let this go. She had seen the determination in his eyes that night at the charity event. And now, as she sat at the kitchen table while her boys played in the living room, she couldn't shake the growing fear inside her. She had spent the last 8 years protecting them, keeping them safe, keeping them away from the man who had broken her heart. And now, he wanted to claim them. Her phone buzzed. A text from her best friend, Olivia. "Check the news. Now." Emma's stomach dropped. With shaky hands, she grabbed a remote and turned on the TV. Sources confirm that billionaire CEO Ethan Carter has filed a petition for paternity rights. The business mogul is seeking legal recognition as a father of 8-year-old twins, whose mother, Emma Walker, has yet to comment. If proven successful, Carter may be granted partial or full custody. Emma's breath hitched. No, 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 no. She turned off the TV, her hands shaking. How could he do this? How could he take this public? Her boys ran into the kitchen, laughing, completely unaware of the storm that was brewing. She forced a smile. "You guys hungry?" "Yeah." They giggled, running to wash their hands. Emma swallowed the lump in her throat. Ethan Carter had no idea who he was messing with. Ethan sat in his penthouse office, watching the news play on the large screen in front of him. The media had picked up the story fast, but he didn't care. He was done playing nice. Ryan stormed in, his face unreadable. Emma's going to be furious. "She was never going to cooperate willingly," Ethan said, leaning back in his chair. "This forces her hand." Ryan exhaled sharply. "You realize this is war now, right?" Ethan's jaw tightened. "It was always war. She kept my children from me. Ryan, she stole 8 years of their lives." Ryan rubbed his temples. "Look, man, I get it. But Emma isn't some gold digger trying to trap you. She raised those boys alone. She fought to give them a good life. Are you really ready to tear her world apart?" Ethan's chest tightened. She had been a great mother. That much, he knew, but he had missed too much already. "I don't want to hurt her," Ethan admitted, "but I'm not going to sit back and let her keep my kids from me." Ryan sighed. "Then get ready for the fight of your life. Because Emma Walker, she's not going down without one." Ethan looked out the window, his hands clenched. Good, because neither was he. Emma stormed into her lawyer's office, gripping the petition papers so tightly her knuckles turned white. "He's taking me to court," she said, her voice shaking with fury. Her lawyer, Susan Martinez, skimmed through the documents and sighed. "He's not just taking you to court, Emma. He's coming for custody." Emma's heart slammed against her ribs. "He can't do that. I've raised them alone. He doesn't even know them." Susan looked at her carefully. "The courts don't just look at history. They'll ask whether having their father in their lives is in the best interest of the children. Ethan Carter is rich, powerful, and well-respected. He has the resources to fight this and win." Emma swallowed hard. Then we fight harder. Susan leaned forward. Emma, are you prepared for what this will mean? The media attention, the court battles, the way it will affect the boys. Emma's chest tightened. I won't let him take them from me. Susan nodded. Then we need to prove that keeping Ethan out of their lives is the best decision for them. We need every piece of evidence showing that you are their primary, stable parent. And more importantly, we need to prove that Ethan isn't fit to be a father. Emma exhaled sharply. Let's do it. Ethan sat across from Ryan, his fingers drumming against the table. She's going to fight you, Ryan said. She already hired Susan Martinez, one of the best family lawyers in the country. Ethan smirked. Then I'll hire someone better. Ryan sighed. Emma's strategy is obvious. She'll paint you as an absent, emotionally unavailable billionaire who only cares now because he found out he has heirs. Ethan's jaw clenched. I care because they're my sons. Then prove it, Ryan shot back. What do you know about them? Ethan opened his mouth, then stopped. He didn't know their favorite foods, their bedtime routines, their hobbies. He knew nothing about them, and that realization burned deep. Ryan leaned forward. You need more than money, Ethan. You need to show the judge that you're more than just a billionaire trying to claim his bloodline. Ethan exhaled slowly. Then that's exactly what he would do. The night everything changed. Emma tucked the boys into bed, pressing a kiss to their foreheads. Mom! Jake, the older twin by 3 minutes, looked up at her with sleepy blue eyes. Yeah, baby, she said softly. Why was your name on TV? Emma's breath caught. What do you mean? I saw it at school, Jake whispered. They said a man wants to take us away. Emma's stomach twisted. No one is taking you away, sweetheart. But who is he? Luke asked, sitting up now. Emma's throat tightened. Just someone from Mommy's past. Jake frowned. Is he our dad? Her heart nearly stopped. For 8 years, she had avoided this conversation. But now, she saw the curiosity in their eyes. The confusion. She forced a smile. You don't have to worry about that, okay? I love you both more than anything. Jake and Luke exchanged a look, but didn't push further. Emma turned off the light and left the room, but as she stood outside their door, she felt it. The war had already begun, and she had no idea if she could win. Ethan stood in the hallway of his attorney's office, staring out the floor-to-ceiling window. His lawyer, Daniel Hartman, was reviewing the case details, flipping through documents with sharp efficiency. You understand this won't be easy, Daniel said. Emma is their legal guardian. The court leans heavily in favor of the mother unless we prove you bring equal, if not greater, stability into their lives. Ethan toned, his jaw tight. I don't just want visitation. I want to be their father. Daniel nodded. Then we need a strategy. Emma is going to argue that you were absent for 8 years and only care now because you saw them. That's an emotional appeal courts take seriously. Ethan exhaled sharply. I didn't know they existed. And that's your strongest argument, Daniel said. You didn't abandon them. You were denied the chance to be in their lives. We build on that. Ethan nodded, determination burning in his chest. Do whatever it takes. I'm not walking away. Daniel smirked. Good, because Emma Walker, she's coming at you with everything she's got. Emma's worst nightmare came true the next morning. Headlines flashed across every major news outlet. Billionaire CEO Ethan Carter fights for custody of secret twins. Mother of Ethan Carter's children refuses to let him in their lives. Is she hiding something? Emma slammed the laptop shut, her hands trembling. This wasn't just a private battle anymore. Her phone buzzed. Olivia. Emma. Olivia's voice was frantic. Have you seen the news? They're making you look like the villain. Emma gritted her teeth. Because he has money and power. He controls the media. They are calling you a bitter ex who's using the kids to punish him, Olivia continued. People are turning on you. Emma swallowed the lump in her throat. She had expected a fight, but she hadn't expected this. I won't let him win, Emma said fiercely. These are my sons. But deep down, fear crept in. What if the court saw things differently? Ethan adjusted his tie, his face unreadable as he entered the courthouse. Cameras flashed, reporters shouted questions, but he ignored them. He had one focus. Emma was already inside, sitting stiffly next to Susan. Her gaze met his for a brief second before she turned away. The judge, an older woman with sharp eyes, cleared her throat. "Mr. Carter, you are requesting legal paternity rights. Ms. Walker, you are contesting. Let's begin." Emma's lawyer stood first. "Your Honor, my client has raised these children alone for 8 years. She had provided a stable, loving home. Mr. Carter, on the other hand, has had zero involvement in their lives until now." Ethan's lawyer stood. "Your Honor, Mr. Carter had no knowledge of their existence. The moment he discovered the truth, he sought to be part of their lives. He is not an absentee father. He is a father who was denied the chance to raise his children." Emma's hands clenched in her lap. The judge studied them both. "Before we continue, I have one question for Ms. Walker." Emma lifted her chin. "Yes, Your Honor." The judge's eyes narrowed. "Why did you never tell Mr. Carter about his children?" The courtroom fell into silence. Emma's heart pounded. She had prepared for this. But when the judge asked it out loud, doubt gnawed at her. She took a deep breath. "Because when I found out I was pregnant, I went to tell Ethan, and he had already moved on with another woman." Ethan stiffened. "I didn't want to beg someone to love their children," Emma continued, her voice firm. "I wasn't going to let my boys grow up feeling unwanted." The judge nodded slowly. "I see. We will reconvene in 2 weeks for further deliberation." The gavel came down. As everyone stood, Ethan turned to Emma, his voice low. "I never would have abandoned them." Emma met his gaze, her eyes stormy with emotion. "You already abandoned me once. I wasn't going to risk them too." And with that, she walked away. Ethan exhaled, watching her go. This wasn't just a custody battle. This was war. Ethan sat in his office, staring at the legal documents spread across his desk. The judge's question haunted him. Why did you never tell Mr. Carter about his children? Emma's answer had hit him like a freight train. She thought he wouldn't care. Ryan walked in, holding a folder. "I did some digging." Ethan glanced up. "On what?" "On Emma's life after she left you," Ryan said, tossing the file onto the desk. "She struggled, man. Worked 2 jobs while pregnant. Lived in a tiny apartment in Queens. No support system. No family. She did it all alone." Ethan's stomach tightened as he flipped through the pictures. Emma, looking exhausted, carrying grocery bags with a baby stroller. Emma, working late nights at a diner. Emma, attending parent-teacher conferences by herself. He swallowed hard. She had fought for their kids when he didn't even know they existed. Ryan sighed. "You want my advice?" Ethan looked up. "You need to stop treating this like a corporate takeover," Ryan said. "You can't just bulldoze your way into their lives with lawyers and court orders. If you really want those boys, you need to show Emma that you're not the same man who walked away 8 years ago." Ethan clenched his jaw. Ryan was right. This wasn't just about winning in court. This was about proving to Emma and to his sons that he deserved to be in their lives. Emma wasn't expecting the knock at her door. When she opened it, her breath caught. Ethan stood there, holding 2 bags of groceries. Her eyes narrowed. "What are you doing here?" He exhaled. "You won't let me see the boys, but that doesn't mean I can't help." He lifted the bags. "I know you're used to doing everything alone, but you shouldn't have to." Emma crossed her arms. "You think a few groceries will fix everything?" "No," he admitted, "but it's a start." She hesitated. The old Ethan, the one who had broken her heart, wouldn't have done this. Before she could stop herself, she stepped aside, letting him in. As he placed the groceries on the counter, the twins ran in from the living room. "Mom, whose?" Jake froze when he saw Ethan. Luke stared, his blue eyes wide. "It's a man from school." Emma's chest tightened. They remembered him. Ethan crouched slightly, trying to keep his voice steady. "Hey, guys!" Jake looked at Emma for guidance, his small hands curling into fists. "Are you our dad?" Emma's breath hitched. Ethan's heart pounded. He looked at Emma, silently asking for permission. She swallowed hard, then gave a small nod. Ethan turned back to them. "Yeah," he said softly. Luke studied him for a long moment. Then, to everyone's shock, he asked, "Do you like dinosaurs?" Ethan blinked. Yeah. Dinosaurs are cool." Jake tilted his head. "Even velociraptors." Ethan smiled. "Especially velociraptors." The boys exchanged a look. "Okay," Jake said. "You can stay for dinner." Ethan looked at Emma, hope flickering in his chest. For the first time, she didn't say no. And for Ethan, that was a start. Ethan sat at the small dining table, his heart pounding harder than it ever had in a boardroom. He had closed billion-dollar deals with ruthless tycoons, but sitting across from his sons for the first time felt like the most important negotiation of his life. Emma served the boys their plates first before setting one in front of Ethan. He noticed a hesitation in her movements. She still didn't trust him. Jake and Luke, however, were already diving into their mac and cheese. So, Jake spoke between bites. "You're really our dad." Ethan nodded slowly. "Yeah, Luke narrowed his eyes. "Then where were you?" The question hit him like a punch to the gut. He looked at Emma, who remained silent, waiting for his answer. "I didn't know you existed," Ethan said honestly. "If I had, I never would have stayed away." The twins shared a look, then turned back to their plates. Emma cleared her throat. "So, what do you do, Ethan?" He glanced at her. "You already know." "I do." She sipped her water. "But they don't." Ethan exhaled. "I run a company. Carter Enterprises." Jake frowned. "Is that why you wear a suit all the time?" Ethan chuckled. "Pretty much." Luke took another bite of mac and cheese, then shrugged. "Mom says we don't need a dad." Emma stiffened, her fork freezing in midair. Ethan's chest tightened. He kept his voice calm. "She's right. You don't need me. You already have an amazing mom." Emma's eyes widened slightly. "But," Ethan continued, "I'd like to be here anyway, if that's okay with you." The boys studied him again. Then Jake, the more cautious one, muttered, "We'll see." Ethan bit back a smile. It wasn't much, but it was something. Emma, however, remained silent. And Ethan knew winning over the twins was one thing. Winning back her trust? That would take a whole lot more. Later that night, after Ethan left, Emma sat on the couch, staring at the empty plate where he had eaten dinner. Olivia's voice rang through the phone. "You let him stay for dinner." Emma sighed. The boys invited him. And Emma hesitated. They liked him. Olivia was quiet for a moment. "And how did you feel?" Emma ran a hand through her hair. "I don't know." She had spent years convincing herself that Ethan Carter didn't deserve to be in their lives, that he had moved on and never looked back. But today, she saw something in his eyes that scared her more than anything. Regret. And regret meant he wasn't going to stop fighting. Olivia sighed. "Emma, are you afraid he's going to take them from you?" Emma swallowed hard. "I'm afraid they're going to love him." Her best friend was silent. Then, softly, she said, "Maybe that's not a bad thing." Emma's throat tightened. "I can't lose them, Liv." "You won't," Olivia reassured her. "But maybe, just maybe, you don't have to fight this alone anymore." Emma wasn't sure what terrified her more, the idea of losing her boys to Ethan, or the possibility that he might actually belong in their lives. Ethan wasn't sure what to expect when Emma texted him the next afternoon. "Emma, the boys have soccer practice at 5 p.m. If you want to come, you can." He stared at the message for a full minute. Was this a test? A trap? Ryan, sitting across from him, raised an eyebrow. "Why do you look like someone just offered you $1 billion deal but forgot to sign the contract?" Ethan ignored him and typed back, "Ethan, I'll be there." At exactly 4:55 p.m., Ethan pulled up to the park. He spotted Emma standing by the bleachers, her arms crossed as she watched the field. When he approached, she barely glanced at him. "Don't embarrass them," she muttered. Ethan smirked. "No promises." On the field, Jake and Luke were practicing with their team. Luke spotted him first. His blue eyes lit up before he quickly tried to play it cool. "Hey," Luke called out. "You came." Ethan smiled. "Of course. Wouldn't miss it." Jake, ever the cautious one, eyed him warily. "Do you even know how to play soccer?" Ethan chuckled. "A little." Luke grinned. "Then let's see if you can stop my shot." Before Ethan could protest, Luke kicked the ball straight toward him. On instinct, Ethan blocked it with his foot, the force making him stumble slightly. The boys erupted in laughter. Emma bit back a smile. Ethan straightened, dusting off his suit pants. "All right, I see how it is." He rolled up his sleeves. "Who's next?" Jake narrowed his eyes. "You think you can stop me?" Ethan smirked. "Try me." Jake's shot was faster, more precise. Ethan barely blocked it in time, nearly falling over in the process. The boys howled with laughter. Luke ran up and high-fived his brother. "Told you is rusty." Ethan shook his head, grinning. Okay, you win. But next time, I'm coming in cleats." Jake gave him a considering look. "You coming next time?" Ethan's chest tightened. "If you want me to." Jake hesitated, then gave a small nod. "Maybe." Ethan glanced at Emma, who was watching him carefully. For the first time since this battle started, Ethan felt it. Progress. That night, Emma sat in the boys' bedroom, tucking them in. "Mom?" Jake asked quietly. "Yeah, sweetheart." He hesitated. "Is it okay if we like him?" Emma's throat tightened. "Of course." Jake stared at his hands. "But I don't want you to be sad." Tears burned at the back of Emma's eyes. She brushed his red curls back gently. "I'm not sad, baby." Luke piped up from his bed. "But you don't like him." Emma sighed. "It's not that simple." Luke frowned. "He said he didn't know about us." Emma looked between them. How could she explain 8 years of pain and betrayal to 2 little boys who just wanted a dad? She forced a smile. "All that matters is that he's here now. And if you want to get to know him, that's okay." Jake studied her carefully. Then, quietly, he said, "Do you think he'll stay?" Emma's heart clenched. That was the real question, wasn't it? She swallowed hard, pressing a kiss to his forehead. "I don't know, sweetheart." But as she turned off the light and walked out, she knew one thing for certain. If Ethan Carter was serious about being in their lives, he was going to have to prove it, because Emma Walker didn't believe in second chances, and she wasn't about to start now. Ethan sat in his penthouse, staring at his reflection in the floor-to-ceiling windows, his grip tightened around the glass of whiskey in his hand. He had spent years believing he could never have children. He had built an empire, thinking there would never be an heir to carry on his legacy. But now, he had 2 sons. His sons, and he'd be damned if he let them down. His phone buzzed. He glanced at the screen. "Emma, the boys have a school event Friday night. A father-son thing. They asked if you'd come." Ethan's pulse quickened. He typed back immediately. "Ethan, I'll be there." He put his phone down and exhaled. This was it. His chance to prove to them, and to Emma, that he wasn't going anywhere. Friday night came faster than Ethan expected. He stood outside the elementary school gymnasium, feeling more nervous than he had in years. Dressed in a casual sweater and jeans, he felt out of place among the other dads, who were laughing and chatting easily. Then, he spotted them. Jake and Luke stood by Emma, their matching red curls unmistakable. The moment Luke saw Ethan, he grinned and waved. He came. Jake, ever cautious, simply nodded. Emma crossed her arms, eyeing him. "You're on time." Ethan smirked. "I'm always on time." "Not 8 years ago." The smile faded from his face. Before he could respond, Luke grabbed his hand. "Come on. There's a 3-legged race, and we need a partner." Ethan allowed himself to be dragged forward. He looked at Jake, who stood a little behind. "You in?" Ethan asked, holding out a hand. Jake hesitated. Then, slowly, he took Ethan's other hand. Emma watched them, something unreadable in her eyes. Ethan swallowed hard, 1 step at a time. And tonight, he wasn't going to let them down. The 3-legged race was more intense than Ethan expected. "On your mark, get set, go." Ethan stumbled as Luke pulled forward with excitement, while Jake hesitated, trying to keep steady. "Dad, you're slow." Luke laughed. Ethan grinned, the word dad hitting him square in the chest. He had waited his whole life to hear that. "Work together." Jake instructed. "Left foot first, then right." Ethan focused, matching their rhythm. Soon, they were running smoothly, passing other fathers and sons. And then, they crossed the finish line. "Second place," the announcer called. Luke jumped up and down. "We almost won." Jake, breathing hard, looked at Ethan. "You didn't quit." Ethan crouched to their level. "I told you, buddy, I'm not going anywhere." Jake studied him, then, hesitantly, gave him a small high five. Emma, watching from the sidelines, felt her heart clench. She had spent years convincing herself Ethan wasn't capable of being a father. But tonight, for the first time, she wasn't so sure. Later that night, after the boys had fallen asleep, Emma walked Ethan to his car. "They had fun," she admitted. "They did." He glanced at her. "And you?" Emma sighed. "You're making this difficult." Ethan frowned. "What's difficult?" She met his gaze, her voice quiet but steady. Ethan's breath caught. He hadn't expected that. For years, she had carried the pain of believing he had abandoned her and the boys. But now he was here, proving that he wanted to stay. Emma shook her head. "I don't know how to handle this, Ethan." He stepped closer, his eyes filled with determination. "Then let me show you." For a moment, they stood in silence. Then, without another word, he got into his car and drove away. Emma exhaled. He was breaking down the wall she had built around her heart. And he wasn't going to stop until they were gone. Emma barely slept that night. Ethan was breaking through her defenses, and it terrified her. For years, she had lived with the belief that he had moved on without a second thought, that he had built his empire while she struggled, raising 2 boys alone. But now, seeing him with Jake and Luke, watching how genuinely he wanted to be there, it shook her. The next morning, Olivia's voice rang through the phone. "You're spiraling," her best friend said. "What's going on in that overthinking brain of yours?" Emma sighed. "He's different. Liv. He's not the same guy who left me behind." "And what's worse?" Olivia asked knowingly. Emma swallowed. "I'm starting to believe him." Silence. Then, Olivia said softly, "Do you want to forgive him?" Emma hesitated, staring at the ceiling. "I don't know." But that was a lie, because deep down, she wanted to. Later that afternoon, Ethan sat in his office when his phone buzzed. "Emma, the boys want you to come over for dinner." He blinked, rereading the message. For weeks, she had kept him at arm's length, refusing to let him into their personal lives. But now, she was inviting him in. His fingers hovered over the keyboard. "Ethan, I'll be there." "What time?" "Emma, 6 p.m. And don't be late." He smirked. Ethan arrived at 5:55 p.m. He wasn't taking any chances with being late. Emma opened the door, looking slightly flustered. "The boys are excited." "I got that impression," he said, stepping inside. The scent of home-cooked food filled the air, something warm and inviting. Luke ran in first. "You came." Jake followed, still more reserved but with a hint of excitement in his eyes. "Mom made spaghetti." Ethan grinned. "My favorite." Emma rolled her eyes. "You're lying." Ethan chuckled. "All right, you got me, but I'm sure it'll be great." Dinner was the first real glimpse into their lives as a family. The boys talked about school, their friends, their favorite cartoons. And for the first time, Ethan felt like he wasn't just visiting. He was a part of it. Halfway through dinner, Luke blurted out, "Mom, can Dad tuck us in tonight?" Emma stiffened, her fork freezing midair. Ethan's heart pounded. He met Emma's gaze, waiting for her response. A silent battle passed between them before she sighed. "If that's what you want." The boys cheered. And Ethan? He knew this was a turning point. He was no longer just a visitor. He was becoming their father, and he would do everything in his power to never lose them again. Ethan followed the twins to their bedroom, his heart pounding harder than it ever had in a boardroom. Jake climbed into his bed, pulling the covers up to his chin, while Luke bounced onto his, still full of energy. "You got to read us a story," Luke announced. Ethan glanced at Emma, who leaned against the doorway, arms crossed. She didn't say a word, but he could tell she was watching him closely. Jake pulled out a worn children's book. "Mom always reads this one." Ethan took the book, flipping through the pages. It was a simple story, but the fact that it was their favorite made it important. Clearing his throat, he began reading. His voice was steady at first, then softer as the boys slowly drifted closer, their eyelids growing heavy. Halfway through, Luke yawned and snuggled under his blanket. "You're not bad at this." Ethan smirked. High praise. By the time he finished, both boys were asleep. He closed the book gently and looked up. Emma was still standing there, her eyes unreadable. For a long moment, neither of them spoke. Then, quietly, she said, "They like you." Ethan's throat tightened. "I like them too." Ethan was about to head home when Emma stepped onto the porch, arms wrapped around herself. "You did good tonight," she admitted. Ethan leaned against the railing, studying her. That almost sounded like a compliment. She smirked but didn't deny it. The air between them was thick with unspoken words. After a long pause, Emma exhaled. "You know, when I first saw you, I was furious." "I know," Ethan said quietly. "I spent 8 years telling myself you didn't care, that you moved on and forgot about me." She looked away. "But now, you're proving me wrong." Ethan stepped closer. "I never forgot you, Emma. And if I had known about the boys, I would have been here." She met his gaze, her walls still up but cracking. "I don't know if I can trust you yet," she admitted. Ethan nodded. "Then let me earn it." Emma didn't say yes, but she didn't say no either. And for now, that was enough. For the first time in 8 years, Ethan felt like he belonged somewhere other than a boardroom. The next few weeks passed in a blur of soccer games, school pickups, and late-night phone calls with Emma about the boys. He wasn't just an occasional visitor anymore. He was becoming a part of their lives. But there were still walls between him and Emma. She let him be with the boys, but when it came to them, she kept her distance. One evening, after dropping the twins home, Ethan hesitated before leaving. "Emma." She turned to him, arms crossed. "What?" He took a deep breath. "Let me take you to lunch." She frowned. "Ethan." "As co-parents," he added quickly. "Just lunch. No pressure." Emma sighed. "I don't know if that's a good idea." "I think it is." He met her gaze. "We need to figure out how to do this. Together." She hesitated. Then, after a long pause, she finally said, "Fine. One lunch." Ethan smiled. It wasn't a date, but it was a step. And right now, he would take whatever step she was willing to give him. The restaurant was cozy and quiet, tucked away from a usual busy city life. Ethan had chosen it carefully, somewhere that felt neutral, safe. Emma sat across from him, her guard up as always. "So, what exactly do you want to talk about?" Ethan set down his menu. "The boys. Us. The future." Emma exhaled. "The boys come first." "I agree." He paused. "But that doesn't mean we have to keep pretending there's nothing between us." Emma looked away. "Ethan, just hear me out." He leaned in. "I know I hurt you. I know you don't trust me yet. But I also know you still feel something." She swallowed hard, gripping her glass. "That doesn't change what happened." "I'm not asking you to forget the past," Ethan said softly. "I'm asking for a chance to make things right." Emma was silent, staring at her untouched plate. Then, just as she was about to speak, her phone rang. She checked the screen, her face immediately tensing. "The school," she muttered, answering quickly. "Hello." A pause. Then, "What? When?" Ethan sat up. "What's wrong?" Emma's face paled. "Jake got into a fight." Ethan's stomach dropped. They didn't need to finish. They had somewhere more important to be. Ethan and Emma rushed into the school front office, their hearts pounding. Jake sat in a chair against the wall, his arms crossed, a fresh bruise forming on his cheek. Luke sat beside him, looking worried. The principal, Mrs. Holloway, sighed. Mr. and Mrs. Carter, thank you for coming. Emma stiffened at the mistaken title, but Ethan barely noticed. His eyes were locked on his son. His son. What happened? Ethan demanded. Mrs. Holloway folded her hands. Jake punched another student. Emma gasped. Jake! Jake looked down, refusing to speak. Luke, however, jumped in. That other kid was making fun of us. Ethan knelt beside them. Making fun of you how? Jake clenched his jaw. He said we don't have a dad. The words hit Ethan like a gut punch. Emma's face softened, pain flickering in her eyes. Oh, sweetheart. Jake's fists tightened. I told him he was wrong. That we do have a dad. He hesitated, glancing at Ethan. And when he laughed, I hit him. Ethan took a slow breath, his heart aching. He wasn't mad at Jake. He was mad at himself. For not being there. For letting his son feel like he had to fight to prove he belonged. Mrs. Holloway sighed. We don't tolerate violence, so Jake will have detention. But given the circumstances, we'll keep it light. Emma nodded. Thank you. Ethan turned back to Jake. I appreciate you standing up for your family. He placed a gentle hand on his shoulder. But next time, we do it with words, not fists. Okay. Jake swallowed hard, then nodded. Ethan ruffled his hair. Good. Now, let's go home. As they left the school, Emma glanced at Ethan, her expression unreadable. And for the first time, she didn't look at him as a man who left her. She looked at him as a father of her children. That night, Emma found herself standing outside Ethan's car as he prepared to leave. Thank you, she said softly. Ethan raised an eyebrow. For what? For handling that the way you did. She sighed. I wasn't sure how you'd react. Ethan leaned against the car. Honestly, a few years ago, I probably would have just thrown money at the problem and expected it to go away. Emma smirked. Sounds about right. He let out a soft chuckle. But that's not who I want to be with them. Emma studied him. And with me? Ethan met her gaze, his voice gentle but firm. I want to be the man you deserved back then. Emma's breath hitched. She wanted to say something, anything, but she wasn't ready. Not yet. So instead, she just nodded. And for Ethan, that was enough. For now. Days passed, then weeks. Slowly, Ethan's presence in the twins' lives became routine. He picked them up from school, helped with homework, and even coached their soccer team once when their usual coach called in sick. The boys no longer hesitated to call him Dad. And Emma, she no longer looked at him like a stranger. One evening, after Ethan dropped the boys off, he lingered at the door. Can we talk? Emma hesitated, then nodded. They sat on the porch, the cool evening air wrapping around them. Ethan cleared his throat. I know things between us are complicated, but I need to ask you something. Emma raised an eyebrow. Go on. He took a deep breath. What if we stop pretending that this is just about the kids? She tensed. Ethan, I still love you. His voice was raw, honest. And I think you still love me too. Emma looked away. Love isn't enough. Ethan exhaled. Maybe not, but it's a start. Silence hung between them. Then, in a voice so quiet it was almost lost in the breeze, Emma whispered, I'm scared. Ethan reached for her hand. So am I, but I don't want to run from it anymore. Emma didn't pull away, and for the first time, she let herself believe that maybe, just maybe, they could have a second chance. The next weekend, Ethan took the boys on a trip to the countryside. They fished, roasted marshmallows, and spent hours laughing under the open sky. One evening, as they sat by the lake, Luke suddenly asked, Dad, are you gonna marry Mom? Ethan nearly choked on his drink. What? Jake rolled his eyes. You love her, right? Ethan hesitated, then nodded. Yeah, I do. Luke grinned. Then marry her. Ethan chuckled. It's not that simple, buddy. But as he stared at the setting sun, an idea began to form. Maybe, It was that simple. Maybe it was time to fight for her the way she had fought for their boys all these years. Ethan stood outside Emma's house, his heart pounding. He had faced billion-dollar deals, ruthless competitors, and high-stakes negotiations. But nothing had ever scared him as much as this moment. Emma opened the door, her eyes widening at the sight of him. Ethan. He took a deep breath. Then, right there on her porch, he dropped to one knee. Emma gasped. "What are you?" "I know I don't deserve an easy yes," Ethan interrupted. "I know I broke your heart once. And I know you're scared." Her eyes glistened. "But I also know that I love you," he continued. "I love our family. And I don't want to waste another second pretending that anything else matters." Emma covered her mouth, her breath shaky. Ethan pulled out a ring. "Marry me, Emma." Silence. Then, a tear slipped down her cheek as she whispered, "Yes." The ceremony was small, intimate, just family and close friends. As Emma walked down the aisle, her heart pounded. Ethan stood at the altar, looking at her the way he used to, only this time. There was no fear, no hesitation. Only love. Jake and Luke stood beside him, beaming. When she reached him, Ethan took her hands, his voice filled with emotion. "I promise to never take the second chance for granted." Emma smiled, tears in her eyes. "I promise to let go of the past and trust our future." And as they sealed their vows with a kiss, their boys cheered. They weren't just a couple. They were a family. Forever. Life wasn't perfect. There were still challenges, late-night arguments, and the chaos of raising twin boys. But through it all, they had each other. Ethan no longer questioned whether he was meant to be a father. He was, and he was damn good at it. One evening, as they sat together watching the sunset, Emma rested her head on his shoulder. "Are you happy?" she asked. Ethan kissed the top of her head. "Happier than I ever thought possible." Because after all the pain, all the heartbreak, they had found their way back to each other. And that was all that mattered. Years later, at a family barbecue, Jake and Luke ran across the yard, laughing. Emma leaned against Ethan, her wedding ring glinting in the sunlight. "You know," she mused, "if someone had told me 8 years ago that we'd end up here, I wouldn't have believed them." Ethan chuckled. "Me neither." She turned to him, eyes warm. "But I'm glad we did." Ethan kissed her softly. "Me too." And as their children's laughter filled the air, they knew some love stories never truly end. They just find their way home. The end. If you enjoyed this story, please give it a like and don't forget to subscribe for more heartfelt stories.